I want you to do something for me. Close your eyes for a second and just picture a standard map of the world.
Hmm.
You know the one, I mean, the kind that probably hung in your third grade classroom. It's this patchwork quilt of bright colors.
Right. France is purple, Germany's orange, Iraq is green.
Exactly. And between all those colors, you have these bold, uncompromising black lines.
Borders.
The political map.
Yeah.
It tells us where one jurisdiction ends and another one begins. It tells us who taxes whom and, whose army patrols which fence.
Precisely. It's a map of authority. But for this deep dive, we are going to look at a map that, well, it completely ignores those lines. If you were to overlay a map of what people actually eat.
A culinary map.
A culinary map, yes. If you put on top of that political map how people season their lentils, how they treat a guest, how they bake their bread, those black lines don't just blur, they completely dissolve.
They become irrelevant. That is the perfect way to frame this.
Well,
When you look at the world through the lens of cuisine, you really do stop seeing countries.
what do you see instead? You start seeing civilizations, you see climate zones, you see trade routes that are thousands of years old, still pulsing through the way a grandmother in Tehran seasons a stew.
And the region we are exploring today is, I think, the ultimate example of that cuisine leaking through borders phenomena. We usually call it, politically the Middle East, or maybe if we're being a bit more technical, the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa. But honestly, after going through the source material for this, those terms feel a little small, a little clinical.
Well, they are. They're geopolitical terms, not cultural ones. They define the region by its relationship to Europe or, by its oil reserves.
Yeah.
But culinarily, we are looking at something much, much bigger. We are looking at a massive civilization belt.
Civilization belt. I really like that phrase because we aren't just talking about a few countries here. We are talking about a culinary sphere that stretches all the way from the Atlantic coast of Morocco,
They're across North Africa.
straight through the Mediterranean and Levant, down into the humidity of the Horn of Africa, across the high Iranian Plateau, and all the way up into the windswept steppes of Central Asia.
It is a staggering amount of geography. I mean, you're talking about snowy mountains, scorching sand dunes, lush river deltas, temperate coasts. You're talking about dozens of cultures: Arabs, Persians, Turks, Kurds, Berbers, Uzbeks.
Which, on paper, sounds like a recipe for total chaos.
Uh,
How can there possibly be a unified food culture across that kind of diversity?
Well, that is the mission of this deep dive, to show you that despite the distance, despite the dozens of languages, and, let's be honest, the turbulent politics, there is a shared DNA to this food.
It's not that the food is identical.
Oh, not at all. A Moroccan tagine is not an Iranian koresh, but they're related. The sources use a great analogy. They are distinct cousins, but you can tell they come from the same grandmother.
There was a sentence in the introduction of our main source that really anchored this whole thing for me. It describes the region as a bread and rice civilization of shared tables built on grains, legumes, herbs, and preserved brightness, where trade routes turn spice into memory.
That is a beautiful summary, but it's also incredibly dense, technically. Every word in there is doing a lot of work.
Preserved brightness. That one really jumped out.
Preserved brightness and trade routes. Those are the key mechanisms. So we aren't just going to talk about recipes today. We're going to talk about how geology, empire, and religious history all collided to create a way of eating that is fundamentally different from, say, the butter-heavy French tradition or the soy-based East Asian tradition.
Okay, so let's unpack this. If we want to understand why a plate of food in Beirut tastes, distantly related to a plate of food in Tashkent, we can't start with the chef.
No, you can't. You have to start with the dirt, the land itself. We call this the logic of the land.
The logic of the land.
You have to remember, for 99% of human history, there were no grocery stores. There were no refrigerated shipping containers. You couldn't just decide you wanted a banana in Moscow. The landscape dictated the menu.
It was a dictatorship of geography.
A complete dictatorship, exactly. And in this vast region, despite its size, you see these specific geographic patterns repeating themselves over and over. And these patterns created, basically, 4 distinct food zones.
All right, let's walk through these zones, because this is really where the pantry comes from. Zone 1, the river valleys.
The Nile in Egypt and the Tigris and Euphrates and what's now Iraq, these are the engines of history, the cradles of civilization. And you have to ask, why? Why there?
The water.
The water, yes. But more specifically, it's about the mud.
Mud.
Silt. Rich, black, fertile silt. Every year, these rivers would flood their banks and deposit this incredible layer of nutrients. This allowed these ancient societies to do something new, something revolutionary. They could grow massive industrial amounts of carbohydrates.
So we're talking about wheat and barley.
Wheat and barley. This is the birthplace of bread, the absolute breadbasket of the ancient world.
But not just bread, right?
It's also the bean basket. When you have that kind of water and that kind of heat, you grow legumes. Lentils, fava beans, chickpeas. These are high-energy, protein-rich, incredibly filling foods.
And you can see that legacy today.
Absolutely. That's why, to this day, the diet in Egypt is so heavily reliant on beans. The national dish is full madame, slow-cooked fava beans. It's heavy, sustaining food. It's fuel for laborers who have to, build pyramids or work the fields all day.
It's fascinating because that geography creates a daily bread culture it's just so different from, say, a hunter-gatherer culture. It's about density and fullness.
Precisely. It's about caloric security. It's the foundation of a settled society. Now let's contrast that with Zone 2. The coasts, the Mediterranean rim, so Turkey, Lebanon, Palestine, Tunisia.
Totally different vibe. I'm picturing blue water, a bit of a breeze, hillsides.
And what's on those hillsides? Specifically olive trees. This creates what I like to call the olive oil line. North of this line, or deep in the interior, people cook with butter or animal fat. But on the coast, olive oil is the lifeblood of the cuisine. It's used for frying, for dressing, for preserving. It's everything.
And the climate is so much milder.
Right. You don't have the freezing winters or the scorching desert heat. So you can grow fresh produce almost year-round. You have tomatoes, cucumbers, fresh herbs, citrus. This creates a cuisine that is vegetable-forward and bright.
This is what most Westerners picture when they hear Middle Eastern food.
I think so, yes. Tabbouleh, fresh salads, a squeeze of lemon juice. It's that fresh, vibrant, healthy image.
But that's really just a sliver of the region, the coastal part. If you drive just a few hours inland from Beirut, you hit Zone 3, the arid zones, the desert.
And this is where the culinary science gets really impressive. In the desert, the #1 rule is survival. The enemy is spoilage. Heat kills food. Bacteria loves heat and moisture. So how do you eat?
You have to get creative.
You rely on 2 core technologies: sugar preservation and fermentation.
Okay, sugar preservation.
Yeah.
We're talking about dates.
The date palm is a miracle of an organism. It grows in places where almost nothing else can survive. And the fruit is incredibly high in sugar, which means it doesn't rot easily. It basically cures itself on the branch.
Nature's energy bar.
It's the perfect portable food. For a Bedouin traveler, a bag of dates is life. It's high-calorie, shelf-stable fuel that you can carry for weeks.
But you can't live on sugar alone. You need protein. And this is where that portable protein concept from the source is just, it blew my mind.
This is one of the great food innovations of the region and of humanity, really. So picture a nomadic tribe. They have their herds, camels, goats, sheep. They have plenty of milk.
Right.
But you cannot carry a bucket of fresh milk across a desert on the back of a camel. It will spoil in 4 hours.
So what do you do with it?
You ferment it. You let beneficial bacteria turn the lactose, the milk sugar, into lactic acid.
Oh, that's yogurt.
That's yogurt. The acid kills the bad bacteria. It preserves the milk's nutrients.
But even yogurt is still wet and heavy. It's not ideal for long journeys.
Correct. So they took it a step further. They strained the yogurt to get most of the water out, making labneh. Then they salted it heavily. Then, and this is the genius part, they rolled it into balls and dried it in the sun until it became a rock-hard stone.
A milk rock.
Literally. In Jordan, they call it jamid. In Central Asia, it's kashk or karot. It looks like a rough, chalky stone. It can last for years. You just keep it in a saddlebag.
And when you want to eat it?
You smash a piece off and rehydrate it in hot water, and it dissolves back into a tangy, salty, umami-rich broth or sauce.
That is just incredible. So that tangy, sour flavor we associate with so much Middle Eastern food, the yogurt sauces, the labneh, the taste of jamid in Jordan's national dish, mansaf, it wasn't originally a chef's choice.
No, it was a survival hack. It was a food security strategy. But over thousands of years, that survival hack became the palate of the people. They learned to crave that sour punch. It transitioned from, we need this to live, to, we need this because it tastes like home.
Which is just the story of all cuisine, really. And that brings us to the final zone, Zone 4. The steppes and mountains. We're talking Central Asia, the Iranian Plateau, Eastern Turkey.
This is pastoral land. Harsh land. You can't farm wheat easily on a 45-degree rocky slope. But you know what loves it?
Goats and sheep.
Goats and sheep. So the cuisine here naturally shifts to red meat dominance. Lamb, mutton, goat. And because the winters are absolutely brutal, we're talking minus 20 degrees Celsius or colder, you need fat. You need calories for warmth.
So this is where you get the heavy caloric dishes.
Exactly. Dumplings like manti, rich pilafs cooked with huge amounts of oil or tail fat, heavy stews. It's all fuel for warmth and survival.
Okay, so let's recap the zones. We have the river valleys giving us bread and beans, the coast giving us olive oil and herbs, the desert giving us dates and preserved dairy, and the mountains giving us meat and fat.
And when you mix and match those four zones together over thousands of years of trade and conquest, you get the Middle Eastern pantry.
Speaking of thousands of years, we have to do some time travel now.
Uh-huh.
Because the logic of the land is just the stage, right?
Right.
History provides the script.
Absolutely. We need to look at the historical layers. If you were to do an archaeological dig on a plate of food, what would you find at the bottom?
The bedrock. The ancient roots. We're talking Mesopotamia and Pharaonic Egypt. You're talking 4,000 plus years ago.
This is the era of domestication. This is where humanity first figured out how to tame wild wheat and barley. And if you look at the records they left, cuneiform tablets from Babylon, or the tomb paintings in Egypt, you see recipes and they are surprisingly familiar.
What were they eating? What was on the menu?
Well, a lot of stews. Meat, probably mutton cooked with water and fat. And onions. So many onions. Garlic. Leeks.
And bread, of course.
And bread. And beer. The sources mention that beer back then was basically liquid bread.
It was a meal.
It was a staple. It wasn't just for, partying. It was a huge part of your caloric intake. So if you sit down today and eat a piece of flatbread with some grilled meat and a raw onion, which is still a very common worker's lunch across the region, you are effectively eating a meal that a Babylonian construction worker would recognize.
Wow.
That is the foundational layer, primal and simple.
But it's a bit rustic, It's sustenance. The layer of refinement comes later. And for that, the sources all point to one specific place, Persia.
You cannot overstate the importance of the Persian empires, the Achaemenids, the Sassanids. While much of Europe was, running around in the Dark Ages, the Persian courts were treating food as high art. They were the French chefs of the ancient world.
What was it that they changed? What did they bring to the table?
Complexity. They introduced complexity and balance. They had this idea that food should balance the body and the soul, the hot and the cold. They brought in the concept of sweet and sour in a big way.
So this wasn't just about taste.
No, it was philosophical. But the result was delicious. They realized that if you cook a savory, fatty lamb stew, but you add pomegranates or sour plums or apricots, the acid cuts the fat and creates this elegant, perfumed flavor that is just incredible.
And rice. They changed the game with rice.
Well, the cult of rice. Before Persia, grains were mostly ground into flour for bread or, boiled into a simple porridge. The Persians elevated rice into an art form. They invented the steaming techniques to make each grain fluffy and separate. And they invented the jeweled rice.
Which is just beautiful to look at.
It was a flex. It was meant to be. Decorating a mound of rice with almonds, pistachios, candied orange peel, barberry, saffron. It showed immense wealth and sophistication. It was food as spectacle.
So you have the ancient grains as the base, then the Persian refinement on top. But then the world opens up, the trade routes.
The Silk Road and the Indian Ocean trade, this is the disruptor layer. Suddenly the pantry just explodes with new ingredients.
From the east.
From the east, yeah. You have spices coming from India and Southeast Asia that were previously unknown or impossibly rare. Black pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, nutmeg.
It is wild to realize that cinnamon, which to me just smells like a Middle Eastern bazaar, doesn't grow anywhere near there.
Not even close. It comes from Sri Lanka or Indonesia. It had to travel thousands of miles on dhows across the ocean and then on camels across the desert. That made it incredibly expensive.
So using it was a status symbol.
A massive one. Using spice wasn't just about making food taste good. It was about showing off. It was like wearing a Rolex today. It signaled that you were cosmopolitan, that you were connected to the global economy.
But the biggest disruptor of all, the one that really messed with my head when I read the notes, was the Columbian Exchange.
This is the part that shatters our illusion of tradition. We tend to think of traditional food as something that has been exactly the same for 2,000 years, but that's a complete myth.
Because of the Americans?
Correct. After 1492, you have this flood of new ingredients coming to the Old World. Tomatoes, potatoes, chili peppers, corn, bell peppers, certain types of beans.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let that sink in. Think about Turkish food. Or North African food.
Exactly. Can you even imagine a Turkish breakfast spread without tomatoes? Can you imagine Tunisian food without harissa, their iconic chili paste?
Or Lebanese batata haris, spicy potatoes with garlic and cilantro.
None of those things existed in the Middle East before the 1500s. The potato and the chili are from the Andes. The tomato is from Mesoamerica.
So shakshuka, that iconic North African and Levantine dish of eggs poached in a spicy tomato sauce, that's basically a modern invention.
In the grand scheme of a 4,000-year-old culinary history, yes, it's a post-Columbian dish. The chili and the tomato are immigrants, but the region adopted them so enthusiastically, so completely, that they became indigenous in spirit. It's a great reminder that cuisine is never static.
It's a living language.
It's always absorbing new words, always evolving.
So we have the land, the layers of history, the trade. But there's one more layer that, according to the sources, really glued this all together. The unifiers.
Religion and empire, specifically the spread of Islam and the rise of the Ottoman Empire.
How did religion act as a culinary force? I mean, beyond just dietary restrictions.
Well, when Islam spread starting in the 7th century, it created what you could call a culinary common market. It brought a shared set of dietary laws, halal, no pork, no blood, restricted alcohol. This meant that a Muslim merchant could travel from Cordoba in Spain all the way to Baghdad, a journey of thousands of miles, and he knew the rules of the table.
It lowered the friction of travel. It created a baseline of trust.
Drastically. He knew the meat was slaughtered correctly. He knew what to expect. He recognized the bread. It created a unified cultural and commercial zone. And then much later, the Ottoman Empire acted as the great standardizer.
The Ottomans controlled this massive chunk of land for centuries. And the sources really emphasized the role of the Topkapi Palace kitchens in Istanbul.
The Sultan's kitchen was less a kitchen and more a culinary university or a state-funded food laboratory. At its height, it employed over 1,000 cooks. And they were all specialists. You had a chef who only made pilaf, a chef who only made jams and preserves, a chef who only grilled meat.
Talk about niche careers. The head of yogurt.
It sounds funny, but that level of specialization led to an incredible level of perfection. They took the rough, peasant dishes from across the empire and refined them into palace cuisine. They took the nomad's simple layered bread and turned it into the delicate paper-thin phyllo for baklava.
And the stuffed vegetables.
Right. They took the peasant's humble stuffed vegetable and turned it into the elegant dolma, adding things like pine nuts and currants and allspice.
And because it was a centralized empire, those refined recipes didn't stay locked away in the palace.
No, of course not. The Ottomans sent governors and pashas to Cairo, to Jerusalem, to Damascus, to the Balkans, and those governors brought their household staff, including their chefs, and those chefs brought the palace recipe.
And that's how it spread.
That is exactly why today you find variations of stuffed grape leaves in Greece, in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Egypt, all across the Balkans. It's the Ottoman footprint.
It's like the franchise model of the 16th century.
In a way, yes. They standardized the high cuisine of the entire region.
Okay, so we've built the foundation, the geography, the history. Now I want to get into the nuts and bolts of the food itself. The sources identify a common DNA, a set of traits that hold true whether you are in a souk in Marrakech or a tea house in Isfahan.
There are 5 key traits. If you can understand these 5 principles, you can basically understand the entire cuisine.
Let's do it. Trait 1, bread or rice as architecture.
I love this phrasing because it's so true. In the West, we often treat starch as a side dish. You know, you order a steak and maybe there's a potato or some bread on the side.
It's accessory.
It's an accessory. In this region, the grain is the foundation. It is the architecture of the meal. It is not on the side, it's the plate.
And often it's the utensil, right?
It's the utensil, it's the plate, it's the base. In many places, a piece of flatbread is your smoon. You tear a piece, you use it to scoop the stew or the dip, you eat it. The entire meal is built on top of the rice mound. If you don't have the grain, you simply don't have a meal. It is the canvas.
Okay, trait 2, the bright versus rich equation.
Yeah.
This feels like the most actionable insight for any of our listeners who cook.
It is the absolute secret to why this food is so craveable. So much of Middle Eastern food is incredibly rich. We're talking about lamb fat, olive oil, tahini, nuts, ghee. It's dense. If you just served that on its own, it would be heavy and cloying.
You'd take 3 bites and be done.
You'd be done. So they weaponize acid.
They weaponize acid. I like that.
They use acid aggressively to cut the fat, But they don't just use vinegar like in much of Europe. They have a whole arsenal of acids. Lemons, obviously, are huge, but also sumac, that crushed red berry that tastes like a tart, savory citrus, pomegranate molasses, dried limes, which we'll talk about, yogurt, pickles.
So it's all about creating balance.
It's a non-negotiable equation. It's a law of physics in their cooking. If you are eating a fatty lamb kebab, it will almost always be served with a grilled tomato for acidity, or onions dusted with sumac, or a sour yogurt drink. The acid cleanses your palate so you are ready for the next rich bite of fat. It's a delicious cycle.
Trait 3, aromatics as foundation.
This is about how you start the pot. In French cooking, you start with mirepoix, onion, carrot, celery. In the Cajun South, you have the Holy Trinity. In the Middle East, the base is almost always onion and garlic, but, and this is the key, they are often cooked down slowly with the spices themselves.
You bloom the spices in the hot oil.
Right. You don't just sprinkle them on top at the end. You fry the turmeric, the cumin, the coriander in the oil with the onions at the very beginning. This process releases their essential oils. It creates a deep, aromatic base note that permeates the entire dish. It's not an afterthought. It's built into the very foundation of the flavor.
Okay, trait 4, communal consumption, the modular table.
This completely changes the physics of eating. In the West, we're so used to the pre-plated dish, your own personal plate with your meat at 6 o'clock and your veg at 12 o'clock.
Right.
Here, that's rare. What you get is a table full of components, mezze. A bowl of hummus, a plate of cheese, some pickles, some olives, the grilled meat, a basket of hot bread.
So you build every bite yourself.
Exactly. You are the architect of your own mouthful. You tear a piece of bread, you swipe it in the hummus, you grab a pickle, maybe a piece of meat. It makes eating an active, engaging process. And it encourages conversation because you're all reaching into the same center, sharing from the same plates.
And finally, trait 5, preservation culture.
Which loops us all the way back to our desert survival discussion. But now, it's not just about survival, it's about adding flavor and complexity. A jar of pickled turnips isn't just food storage for the winter anymore. It's a bright, crunchy, neon pink firework on the plate that wakes up your mouth.
Pink fireworks. I love that. Okay, so that's the shared DNA. But families have siblings, and siblings, well, they have different personalities. The personality map in the notes is brilliant because it really helps distinguish the regions. Let's start with Iran. The sources call it the poet.
That is a perfect description. Persian cuisine is arguably the most elegant and refined of the entire region. It is emphatically not spicy hot. There is almost no chili heat in traditional Persian food. The flavor profile is floral.
Saffron and rosewater come to mind immediately.
Saffron, rosewater, and herbs. The sheer volume of fresh herbs is staggering. They have a dish called sabzi cordon, which is literally just a giant platter of fresh basil, mint, tarragon, radish, and scallions. You don't chop them up into a salad, you eat them whole by the handful with some feta cheese and flatbread.
And we absolutely have to talk about the rice tide.
The holy grail of Persian cooking. It's the complete opposite of how we think about rice. In the West, we boil rice and we hope it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pot.
Right, sticking is failure.
In Iran, they encourage it to stick, but in a very controlled, deliberate way. They parboil the long-grain basmati rice to get some of the starch off. Then they layer it back into the pot over a slick of butter or oil and saffron-infused yogurt, and then they steam it very gently. The bottom layer essentially fries in the fat,
Creating a crust.
a golden, crispy, glass-like crust. That is the tadig. When they ceremoniously flick the pot onto the platter, that crust is the crowning jewel. The host breaks it up and offers it to the most honored guest first. It's a textural masterpiece, that incredible crunch against the fluffy, cloud-like separate grains of rice.
Moving west from Iran, we get to Iraq, the ancient crossroads.
Iraq is a fascinating hybrid. It has a lot of the Persian rice culture and the use of sweet-sour flavors, but it mixes it with the more ancient Arab river valley traditions. It's smokier, it feels a bit more primal.
The sources all highlight one dish.
Yeah.
Maskouf.
Yes, the national dish of Iraq. It's a giant river carp, usually from the Tigris or Euphrates. They split it open, butterfly style, season it with salt, tamarind, and turmeric, and then they stake it into the ground next to a wood fire. Not over the fire, but next to it.
So it cooks with radiant heat.
Exactly. It slow roasts in the radiant heat and the smoke, which makes the skin crispy and the flesh incredibly moist. It's a beautiful, ancient way of cooking.
And they use dates in everything.
It's one of the oldest date cultures on Earth. They use date syrup, called dibis, the way Americans might use maple syrup or molasses. It adds this deep, dark sweetness to stews and marinades, and they love sourness tamarind and dried lime. It's a very bold, punchy cuisine.
Okay, let's hit the Levant. So we're talking Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine. The sources call it the garden.
This is the fresh zone. This is where that Mediterranean coastal climate really shines. It's the home of the messe. The focus here is on the quality of the raw ingredient above all else. Is the parsley and the tabbouleh perfectly crisp? Is the olive oil grassy and pungent? Is the lemon perfectly ripe?
It feels much lighter than the other regions we've talked about.
Much lighter. It's grazing food.
Yeah.
You can sit for 3 hours eating small bites of baba ganoush, hummus, stuffed vine leaves, and endless salads. It's very social food. It's the kind of food you eat while you're solving the world's problems over a long lunch with your friends.
Then north to Turkey. The bridge.
Turkey is fascinating because it's a collision of worlds. First, you have the Central Asian nomadic roots. You have to remember the Turks were originally horsemen from the steppes.
So they brought the dumplings and the love of dough with them.
They brought the mantic, these tiny, intricate dumplings served with garlic yogurt and a drizzle of chili-infused butter. And they brought the burek-layered dough pastries. They are absolute masters of wheat dough, yufka, phyllo, you name it. But then you have the layer of Ottoman palace refinement we talked about earlier, and the grill culture. But not just, meat on a stick. We're talking about dishes like the Iskender kebab. Thinly sliced doner kebab laid over a bed of chopped flatbread covered in a warm tomato sauce, then doused at the table with sizzling brown sheep's butter and served with a big dollop of thick yogurt. It's rich, buttery, tangy, and incredibly sophisticated.
And yogurt is everywhere.
Oh, Turkey is the land of yogurt. They eat it with almost every savory food. They make soup out of it, yağlı çorbası, and they drink it salted and thinned with water, ayran, with every meal. It's essential.
Let's go south to Egypt, the feeder.
Egypt stands a bit alone. It's this ancient river-fed agricultural machine. The food is dense. It's about calories. It's hearty and unpretentious.
We mentioned the beans earlier.
Full madams is breakfast, lunch, and dinner for millions. It's the fuel of the nation. But you also have tameya. We in the West know falafel as being chickpea-based. But in Egypt, its birthplace, they make it with dried fava beans.
How is it different?
It's much greener on the inside, it's moister, and honestly, many food experts think it's superior to the more common Levantine chickpea version. It has a deeper, earthier flavor.
And what about Molokhia?
Ah, the green soup. It's made from jute mallow leaves. It has a very distinctive mucilaginous texture. A bit slimy, like okra.
That sounds appealing.
Well, people outside of Egypt often struggle with the texture, but Egyptians absolutely adore it. It's the ultimate taste of home. It's cooked with a lot of garlic and coriander and served over rice with rabbit or chicken. It's pure comfort food.
Okay, let's head west to the Maghreb. Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, the spice and sun.
Now the grain changes. We leave the world of rice behind and we enter the land of couscous, which is made of tiny balls of semolina wheat, and it's always steamed, never boiled, until it's incredibly fluffy and light.
And the flavor profile gets much bolder here.
Much bolder. This is where you find that sweet and savory combination taken to its extreme. A classic Moroccan tagine might have lamb, but also apricots, prunes, honey, cinnamon, and toasted almonds. It's fragrant, like a perfume shop in a pot.
And this is where we start to see real heat.
Yes. Tunisia, specifically, loves chili heat. Harissa is their national condiment, a paste of chilies, garlic, coriander, and caraway. It's spicy, garlicky, and smoky. You just don't find that kind of chili-forward heat in traditional Persian or Turkish food.
Let's go down to the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, the ferment.
This is a really unique branch of the culinary family. The key here is the grain. It's called teff. It's a tiny, ancient, gluten-free grain. They grind it into flour, mix it with water, and let it ferment for several days before cooking it into a large, thin, spongy flatbread called injera.
So it tastes sour, like sourdough.
It's very sour, yes. It's like a sourdough crepe, but with a unique spongy texture. And it serves as both the plate and the utensil. You pile these incredibly rich, spicy stews called wats on top of it, and you tear off pieces of the injera to scoop them up.
And the spice blend is unique, too.
The spice blend, berber, is amazingly complex. It has chilies, ginger, garlic, basil, kororima, which is a type of local cardamom. The sourness of the bread perfectly cuts the rich, spicy heat of the stews. It's a perfect flavor engine.
And finally, looping all the way back up to Central Asia, Uzbekistan, for example, the cauldron.
The land of the steppe. This is hearty, no-nonsense food. The winters are minus 20 degrees. You aren't eating a light cucumber and tomato salad here. You are eating plov.
Which is their version of pilaf.
But on a massive scale. It's traditionally cooked by men in giant cast-iron cauldrons called cuisines. It's rice, yellow carrots, onions, and big chunks of fatty lamb or mutton, all swimming in oil and rendered sheep-tail fat.
It sounds incredibly heavy.
It is incredibly heavy and incredibly satisfying. It is fuel for surviving the brutal cold. It's not about freshness or brightness. It's about caloric density and warmth.
It's amazing to see how the geography really did shape the personality of each cuisine. But I want to zoom in on the philosophy of taste across the whole region, because there are some misconceptions we need to clear up.
The biggest one, I think, is the definition of spice.
Right. When we say spiced food, Westerners often hear hot food, like Thai food or Mexican food, something with a lot of chili.
But in most of the Middle East, outside of, say, Tunisia or the Horn of Africa, spice means warmth, aromatic warmth. We're talking about cinnamon, allspice, coriander, cardamom, cumin, cloves, nutmeg.
It wraps you up in a blanket. It doesn't burn you with a blowtorch.
Exactly. It's about fragrance and aroma. When you bite into a piece of shawarma, it's not burning your tongue. It's exploding with a dozen different aromas. It triggers memory.
And we touched on this earlier, but it's worth coming back to. The sweet-savory interplay.
This is something that modern Western cuisine has largely lost. If you look back, medieval European food actually used a lot of sugar and fruit in savory meat dishes, but we eventually separated them into a main course and a dessert. The Middle East kept that connection.
But it's not candy sweet.
No, not at all. It's about contrast. The sweetness of a raisin or a drop of pomegranate molasses is there to highlight the savory umami of the lamb. It makes the meat taste meatier. It adds another dimension of flavor.
Let's talk about texture. The sources make a big deal about the crunch.
Because texture prevents palate fatigue. If everything you're eating is soft rice, soft stew, soft bread, your brain gets bored. It tunes out. You stop tasting things as vividly, so they engineer crunch.
The toddy crust is the ultimate example.
The toddy crust, yes, but also pine nuts toasted in butter and sprinkled on top of creamy hummus. The sharp crunch of a pickled cucumber against a soft, tender kebab. The crackle of crispy onions on top of mujadara.
It keeps you interested in the next bite.
It does. It's a very sophisticated subconscious understanding of how we experience food.
And finally, the philosophy of patience.
Layering over speed. You simply cannot rush this food. A Moroccan tagine needs 3 hours for the flavors to meld. Properly caramelizing onions for a stew base takes 45 minutes of slow, patient stirring. Soaking and rinsing rice properly can take hours. It's a cuisine that respects the ingredients by giving them the time they need to transform. It is the absolute antithesis of fast food.
Which leads us to the final and maybe the most important segment of all. You cannot separate this food from the culture of hospitality.
No, you can't. In fact, you could argue that the food is just the vehicle for the hospitality. The food is the vocabulary they use to speak the language of generosity.
The sources describe hospitality in this region not as a hobby or entertaining, but as an ethic.
It's a moral imperative. It goes back to the desert. In the desert, if a traveler arrives at your tent, they are vulnerable. They might die without water or food. So the law of the desert evolved. You must feed the guest. You have no choice.
Even if they're an enemy.
Traditionally, yes. The law was that for 3 days, you must feed them and protect them, no questions asked. This powerful ethic filtered up from the nomadic tribes into the cities and into modern life. If someone comes to your door in Amman or Istanbul, you are socially and morally obligated to offer them tea, coffee, fruit, something to eat.
Why is it so intense? Why is it such a core value?
It's about honor and dignity. To be stingy with food is the ultimate shame. It suggests you are weak or poor in spirit or lacking in character. To be generous, even if you have very little yourself, is a way of signaling your status and your humanity. It says, I have enough to share and you are worthy of being shared with.
There's a phrase in the notes that I just loved. Food is the relationship.
Think about the communal platter we talked about earlier. When you put a giant amount of rice and meat in the center of the table and everyone eats from it, using their hands or bread, you are breaking down barriers. You are physically sharing sustenance from the same source. You become vulnerable together.
It's a powerful signal. It says, you are safe here.
You are welcome here. I'm responsible for you. You are under my protection. That is a very primitive, very powerful signal that creating individual plates for everyone just doesn't achieve. It creates a bond.
It anchors the community.
It anchors everything. Births, deaths, weddings, business deals. Nothing happens without tea, coffee, and food. It is the glue of society. There are specific rituals for everything. Breaking the fast during Ramadan, that first date and sip of water is a sacred moment. The specific sweets served at a funeral, the special spiced pudding, megli, served when a baby is born. Food marks time and gives it meaning.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the silt of the Nile to the saffron of Iran, from the survival tactics of the desert Bedouin to the high art kitchens of the Ottoman palaces.
It's been a rich journey for sure.
If the listener takes one thing away from this whole deep dive, what do you think it should be?
I think it's the idea that this cuisine is a masterclass in resilience and identity.
How so?
Well, this is a region that has seen more conflict, more shifting borders, and more displacement than almost anywhere else on Earth. Empires rise and fall. Cities are destroyed and rebuilt. People are forced to move as refugees.
But the food remains.
The food is the constant. It travels with them. A family might lose their home, their land, their country, but they don't lose the recipe for their grandmother's stew. And there's a profound sense of control in that.
Control the table.
Exactly. You might not be able to control the politics of your country. You might not be able to control the economy or the borders or your own safety sometimes. But you can control the table. You can decide how the rice is layered. You can preserve the lemons so they last through the winter. You can treat your guest, any guest, with absolute dignity and generosity.
It's a form of order in a chaotic world.
It is. It's a way of saying, here, in this home, at this table, there is warmth, there is flavor, there is history, and there is civilization. And that is a powerful statement.
And a powerful thing to taste.
It certainly is.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.